Yo, what's up guys, welcome to a new video. My name is Wildcrow. Today I'm gonna tell you 8 tips to master the cue, to cue like pros. And as I don't have anything else to explain, let's get to it. The first rule is that there are no rules. The second rule is that you have to locate everything that is not a kick or a sub bass. Now, actually, my opinion is like there are no rules in EQing, because in the end, if it sounds good, it sounds good. Nobody, and I repeat, nobody is gonna know what kind of EQ you have in your vocals or in your sounds when they listen to your song. So if you have to boost 12 dBs to make it something sound good, or reduce 20 dBs and do a really crazy cue to make it sound good, just do it. Okay? The tip or rule number 2, as I said, is to locate everything that is not the kick or the sub bass. And I mean everything. The sub frequency is something that needs to be super clean, and it's so easy to make it sound dirty. And those frequencies should be only for the kick and the sub bass. Let's say that, for example, you're working on the drop and you have 5 lead sounds for the leads, 3 chord sounds for the chords, and 3 mid bass for the mid bass. If we talk about the mid bass, obviously those sounds are gonna have sub frequencies, and they're gonna clash with the sub bass in probably 80 or 100 hertz. So just locate and make it sound clean. If we talk about the leads, maybe some leads have some sub bass that you can hear, and maybe others have some sub bass that you don't hear, but they have a little bit like this. What happens is that you have 5 lead sounds, and if every lead sound have a little bit like this, in the end you have this kind of sub bass. And if we talk about the chords, and every chord sound has a little bit like this, and you have 3, then you have this. And if you put everything together, you have this sub bass. So you need to locate to make sure that you don't have this sub bass in the end. For example, here I have this lead that, as you can see, has a lot of sub bass. So obviously what you want to do is locate this. How much? Well, what I recommend you to do is to always start from here and slightly go up and up and up. At this point you went too far because you changed completely the sound of it. So at this moment, come back a little bit. Here, as you can see, these are the main frequencies and we are not touching them, so we cut all of this. But it also can happen that we have a lead like this. As you can see, there's almost no sub bass. But if we have different leads that have this small sub bass, in the end we end up having the sub bass of the previous lead. So also use a low cut. The tip number 3, and is related to the previous one, is don't use brick wall cuts or super steep cuts. Because if you use these super steep low cuts like 96 dB, 72 dB per octave for a brick wall cut, maybe it changes a bit the phase of the sound and makes it sound different, you know, the character of it sounds different, not just that you change the color. Apart from this, it's not that natural if you want to think like this. So, well, my advice is always max go to 48 dB per octave. And don't skip this video, because at the end I'm gonna show you a way to use low cut, for example, in a kick, and don't change the character of it, so don't skip this video. The tip number 4 is to cut the resonance. The resonance are those frequencies that are super loud and super annoying, and we need to cut them, because otherwise it's gonna take the place of the rest of the sounds. And how to find and cut those resonance, let me show you. If we have a string sound like this, it's so easy to find the resonance. It's this one. Okay, if we boost this, this is the resonance, and I know it's so annoying. So what do you need to do? You can do different things. You can go here and use the notch and just cut it. Okay, maybe reduce a bit the cue. But you change way too much the character of it. I prefer to just go with the bell and maybe a bit more narrow and just reduce. How much? What they think is enough. I can go like this, but as you can see, it changes way too much the sound. It's not the same sound. Maybe something like this. But with this sound was so simple to find, so let me show you with a lead sound. If we come back to this sound, first what we need to do is just low cut, obviously. And now what I'm gonna do is create a bell, make it super narrow, the most narrow I can, put it to the max, come to the highest frequency, and start coming down. Just start here. This frequency, for example, be careful, it's not a resonance, it's just an annoying frequency, and it's loud. Obviously, you're boosting 30 dBs, it's gonna sound loud and it's gonna sound annoying, but it's not a resonance. So this one can be a resonance, so I'm gonna reduce it a little bit, and just go like this. This one is a resonance, obviously. But guys, you need to be careful, and here's where the tip number 5 comes, and it's don't go crazy cutting resonance. You don't want an EQ like this. This is not good for several reasons. The first thing is that as you're cutting basically all the frequencies, in the end you're like without cutting the sound, you know, because you're using all the frequencies. The second thing is that you are not only cutting resonance, you're cutting some frequencies that you boosted, they are loud, and you think there's a resonance, but it's not. And the third thing is that you're cutting all the character of the sound, is making sound so weird and bad and without life. If we take this sound and we take out all of this, sound like this. But now, as you can see, it changes completely the character of it and sounds so bad as it doesn't have a strength. So when you're cutting resonance, you cut it maybe 6-7 resonance. Okay, wait, maybe I'm doing this wrong. What I recommend you to do is go here, mute all of them, and go one by one. Okay, this resonance is doing anything. It's doing a little bit, but not that much, so I'm gonna reduce it a little bit, something like this. Okay, this resonance. Yeah, it's working, maybe I'll leave it, or maybe reduce it a little bit. This resonance. It's not really doing anything. Okay, so just delete it. And this way in the end you're gonna be cutting the resonance, but you're gonna stay with the character of the sound and with the strength of it. Tip number 6 is to use wider bands for a more natural sound when you're boosting or cutting. And I don't want to get in this war of boosting or cutting that people say that you never have to boost and you always have to reduce, but in my opinion it's stupid. Because if you want to boost, you want to make something brighter, you don't have to think, oh no, I want to boost the high frequencies, okay, now I'm gonna go and reduce the mid frequencies because the boosting algorithms are worse than the reducing algorithms, and it's gonna make it sound different and weird and bad if I boost. No. If you want to boost the high frequencies, just go and boost the high frequencies, that's simple. But as I said, use wider bands. For example, if in the sound you want to boost the high frequencies, it's better to do something like this than something like this. Because like this, basically what you're doing is boosting just a small band that is basically creating like a resonance. It's not sounding that natural. And the same happens when you want to reduce. If you want to reduce, for example, the mids to make it sound a bit cleaner, it's better to go with a wider band like this. It's gonna sound more natural than if you go like this. So instead of having this EQ, do it more like this. The tip number 7 is to use dynamic EQ. I know, maybe the EQ you're using doesn't have a dynamic EQ, but FabFilter has, and I'm gonna explain because I think it's so good. Probably happened to you, there are some frequencies that maybe you want to reduce in some parts of the melody or in some parts of the song, maybe in a part of the vocal. That frequency at that moment is so loud. But the problem is that if you use a normal EQ like this one, you're gonna be cutting those frequencies the entire time, when you need it and when you don't need it. And you don't want this, because maybe those frequencies are good in the entire song and only are so loud at one moment. But if you reduce it, at those moments where the song was so good, now it needs those frequencies that you're cutting. It sounds bad. So with FabFilter it's so simple. Instead of having this, put this back to 0 and go to this outer circle and just do it like this. It's so simple, and when it's gonna be needed, when it reaches the threshold, it's gonna reduce until here. And that's why dynamic EQ, in my opinion, is so good, because it helps you to solve the problems of specific moments. So for example, when we talk about leads, maybe in the melody there's one note and only one note that has a resonance in some frequencies, so put a dynamic EQ there. If you have a vocal, maybe it has a resonance in just one word, use this. This way you're gonna solve that problem at that specific moment, but the rest of the time is gonna be good. And last but not least, in mastering I recommend you to use the linear phase mode. Linear phase is just like a super high quality EQ that is not gonna change the phase of the sound and the character of it. So we have this kick, we use a low cut, we put it here. As you can see, the sound changes a little bit, but if we go here and we click linear phase, we can leave it on medium, you don't have to go on maximum. Check what happens now. It doesn't change the character at all, it's the same kind of attack, it's the same sound, we're just reducing the frequencies. But be careful with this, because linear phase mode adds a lot of latency, and if you use this mode in every key that you have in your project, you better be patient, because probably you press play and you have to wait 10 seconds until you hear the sound. So that's why I told you to use it in the mastering. This way, when you're mastering, you're not changing the character of it, you're not changing the phase of it and anything, so you're only changing the color of the sound. So guys, these are my tips to master the EQ, to EQ like pros, but as I said at the beginning, there are no rules. In my opinion, if you want to boost 20 dBs to make it sound good, use 20 dBs. There's no problem at all. Nobody's gonna realize about the EQ you use. I said it at the beginning, so do the EQ you want. And I recommend you to watch this video again, so this way you keep in mind all these tips and then you apply them to your EQing. And nothing else, guys. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope it helped you, and see you in the next video.